Okay, I'm going to start with our learning sponsors. Here's Zev. Good morning, Zev. Labriut.
Thank you.
Our learning sponsors, the Year of Learning, Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael, in memory of Malcolm Mann, a former member, and memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Rav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Rav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Rav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, shall assure her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman Edel Bas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Siddell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, Charna Bas Yeshaya. Friends of Toby Peres, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. A Month of Learning by Haran and Mel Haller, in memory of her father, Yosef Eliezer ben Tzvi Hirsch, by B. Pizer, in memory of her father, Yitzchak Dov ben Shmuel, by Mordechai and Miriam Burr, in memory of his mother, Manya Bas Harav Shimon Halevi. A Month of Learning in honor of those who joined the first series of epistemology of Tefillah classes by Cheryl Scher. A Week of Learning, no. And the Day of Learning today by Mark Kin, in memory of his mother, Shana Sima Bat Moshe Gedalia HaKohen. May the Neshama's have an aliyah, crank or repeat about the Asher Shem Latliya, and the Chol B'nai Yisrael a good Gaben Shtiyah.
Amen.
Okay,
Amen.
Marvin this morning. Okay. And as I said, the fellows that are there at the show may be getting on a drop later because show was running a bit late this morning. Okay. Let's start by quickly pointing out, remember we had this machloket as basically as to whether the fact that when there was an offering in Tuma, whether that was dichuya or hutra, okay? Whether it was the view of one of the sages that it was permitted and one did not have to go back and get kohanim from another family, another Beisav, or whether it was simply put off. Okay. And then we had an extensive discussion about the tzitz, okay, whether or not that had the certain atonement powers, so to speak, only when it was worn by the Kohen Gadol, or even when it was not worn by the Kohen Gadol. And we looked at that. The Gemara went over to Chet Amud Aleph, right, is where we are standing now in a moment. And we're going to pick up there in just a second. And we saw that each was trying to cite different psukim, okay, to support their view. Okay, this was the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Okay, So I'm going to pick up about 6 lines down from the top. We went a little further, but 6 lines down from the top. Okay? Okay, and the argument was, why does one understand one pasuk simply to say where it sits is located, right? Where that sits comes from. V'Rabbi Yehuda, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? L'kboa lo makom minale. So if one uses the phrase mitzcho v'nasa to designate the location, okay, then how, on what basis does the other designate the location? So that's what the Gemara is asking. As far as Rabbi Yehuda goes, on what basis does he designate, fix the location? Nafkale me'al mitzcho, that he learns it from the fact that it says on his forehead. And the Gemara then said, V'Rabbi Shimon nami tepukle me'al mitzcho ein hachinami. And that Rabbi Shimon also, it's possible that he learns it from there, okay, on the that it goes there based on al mitzcho, and ein hachinami, okay, basically that doesn't seem to make any difference, okay, ela al mitzcho v'nasa, okay, but rather he could learn it from the verse, part of the verse that says on his head, and it bears iniquity. It covers the atonement. Maya vidle. So what does he do with that section of the pasuk if he doesn't learn the location of the tzitz from it? Amar lach, he would tell you ra'ui lametzach miratzeh. Okay, that he would argue that when it is, the tzitz is in a status that's fit, that's appropriate, that's when it brings atonement. She'eino ra'ui lametzach, when it's not suitable for the forehead, eino miratzeh, it does not bring the atonement. La'afuki nishbar hatzitz delo miratzeh, to exclude a situation when the tzitz is broken, that's when it does not bring atonement. Okay, so that's basically where we ended off yesterday. Okay, so that's where we're going to, in a moment, pick up. Okay, so the Gemara wants to clarify again. Ula Rabbi Yehuda nishbar hatzitz minale. Okay, and therefore, when the tzitz is not operative, let's put it that way for the moment, according to Rabbi Yehuda, on what does he base it? Nafkale mimetzach mitzcho. Okay, from the fact that the language of the pasuk, all right, doesn't say from the forehead, but his forehead. Rabbi Shimon metzach mitzcho lo mashmale. And as far as Rabbi Shimon is concerned, he apparently does not learn anything different, anything new from the different language between it saying mitzcho, okay, or metzach, forehead in either case. Okay. Now, at this point, the Gemara is going to ask another question. We've got this machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon regarding the tzitz, when it's operative, let's say, when it applies. Okay? And remember, why is that important? Because the Gemara told us that if you say that it's only operative, it only brings atonement at a time when it's worn by the Kohen Gadol, then what about our example of Yom Kippur, where there's a time during the avoda that he does not wear it, okay? That he's not wearing the tzitz. Therefore, that would seem to be, that was the example that one of the earlier sages brought to try to prove his case, his point. Okay. So therefore, the Gemara naturally asks, sorry, as follows: Nema hani tanai, kahani tanai. Shall we say then that these Tanaim dispute the same way that these other Tanaim do? The Tanya, as taught in a Braita, Echad ze ve'echad ze. Okay, namely, when we're saying here this one or this one, okay, who are we referring to? We're referring to the two individuals, okay, the one Kohen Gadol vis-a-vis Yom Kippur, the other a Kohen who's going to be burning the para aduma. Okay, so echad ze ve'echad ze, right? Mazin alav kol shiv'ah michol chatot shehayu sham divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir is arguing that on all 7 days, when these two individuals are sequestered, each day they get sprinkled with water to be purified. Rabbi Yossi Omer, says Rabbi Yossi, Ein marzin alav ela shlishi ushvi'i bilvad. Claims Rabbi Yossi that it's sufficient that they only be sprinkled with water on the 3rd and the 7th days of their sequestering. Okay? And we're going to see in a moment, Sumari, why that's the case. Now we get a third view. Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim Omer, Kohen HaSoref et HaPara Mazin Alav Kol Shiv'ah. He makes a distinction between the two. It's by saying that the Kohen who's going to be burning the para aduma, that Kohen needs to be have water sprinkled on him each of the 7 days that he is sequestered. Kohen Gadol b'yom HaKippurim. However, the Kohen Gadol, ein mazin alav ela shlishi ushvi'i. He has water sprinkled upon him on the 3rd and on the 7th day. Now, why is Rabbi Chanina making this distinction between the two? Okay, whereas Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir did not make such a distinction. Hopefully the Gemara now continues and will clarify for this.
Rabbi Green,
Yes.
What does he mean by the 3rd and 7th day around Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is only 1 day.
True, but remember we're saying that the Kohen Gadol was sequestered 7 days prior to Yom Kippur.
Oh, okay.
So on the 3rd day of the sequestering and the 7th day of the sequestering. That's what it's referring to. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure. So the Gemara now continues to clarify, as Zev has done for us. Mai lav baha kamiflage. What then are they arguing about? Okay. Rabbi Meir Savar, Tuma dechuya hi b'tzibor. Rabbi Meir's of the opinion that when the community is tameh, it's simply put off. And then you would have to get another individual, whether it's to do the atonement ritual for Yom Kippur. It still has to be done. It cannot be done under those circumstances. For Rabbi Yossi Savar, Tuma Heter hi b'tzibur. And Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's permitted that if the majority of the community is tameh, that Kohen Gadol proceeds with the avoda on that day. And so Gemara now continues and asks, V'tispara, can you really believe that's the case? Isavar Rabbi Yossi heter hi b'tzibur. If you're then going to say that Rabbi Yossi's of the opinion that even when the Kohen Gadol or the majority of people are tamei, it is still permitted to carry out the avoda ceremonies on Yom Kippur. Haza'ah klal lamali. Then why do we need sprinkling whatsoever? If you say that it was done on the third day and the seventh day, okay, the sprinkling must come for some purpose. Otherwise, you wouldn't need it. Ela dekuli alma, hani t'na'ai, savre, tuma dechuyahi betzibur. But everybody then must agree that according to these Tanaim, right, they're of the opinion that tuma is simply duchuya, so to speak, not permitted, but put off. In other words, there has to be replacement so that ultimately it's still required to be done. And this is what they're really arguing about. Rabbi Meir Savar Amrinan Tfila Bismana Mitzvah. That Rabbi Meir is of the opinion, okay, that we say that the requirement to immerse, okay, at its fixed appropriate time is a mitzvah. Okay? So, for example, whether it's a yoledet or a mitzora or a zav, okay, particularly yoledet and zav or zava, they have a time frame where it is specifically required for them to be immersed in the mikveh. And he's going to therefore make a parallel between immersing in the mikveh and sprinkling also on the person of the Kohen for the purpose of tahara. For Rabbi Yossi Savar, lo amrin and tefillah bismana mitzvah. And it would appear that Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion that we don't say that immersion in the mikveh for tahara is at a fixed appropriate time is a mitzvah. V'savar Rabbi Yossi, and that Rabbi Yossi therefore must also be of the opinion, lo amrin and tefillah bismana mitzvah, asks the Gemara. Is it really such that Rabbi Yossi doesn't say that immersion at the appropriate fixed time is a mitzvah? But we have a braita, v'hatanya, v'harei haya sham katuv, al b'saro, harei ze lo yirchatz, v'lo yisoch, v'lo ya'amod b'makom hatinofet. Namely, a braita teaches us that if somebody has I'll call it for the moment a tattoo, okay? Something written into their skin that has the divine name on it, right? What's the situation? Harei ze lo yirchatz, he can't wash that part of his body. V'lo yisoch, and he can't put oil on that part of his body. V'lo ya'amod b'makom hatinofet, and he cannot stand in some detestable place either. Nizdamna lo tvila shel mitzvah. Okay, that therefore it's incumbent upon this person to immerse, okay, as a mitzvah. What does the person then do, says the Braita? Korech alav gami v'tovel, that he wraps some reed, okay, around the tattoo, so to speak, of the divine name, and then immerses. Now, Rabbi Yossi Omer, says Rabbi Yossi, Yored v'tovel kedarko. According to Rabbi Yossi, he goes down and immerses according to normal pattern. Ubilvad shelo yeshaf shef. Okay, but only so long as he doesn't, when he immerses, doesn't rub the area of the divine name tattoo. V'kaimala, and therefore we must hold the tefillah bismana mitzvah kamiflage, that therefore the two, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir, are arguing about the issue of immersion at the appropriate fixed time, okay, is a mitzvah. The Tanakama Savar lo amrin and tvila bismana mitzvah, that the earlier Tana, first Tana says we don't say that immersion at that time is a mitzvah. The Rabbi Yossi Savar amrin and tvila bismana mitzvah. Okay. Ella, rather, says the Gemara, the Kuli Alma lahani t'na'ai amrinan tvila bismana mitzvah. But rather we say that everyone is agreement that according to these Tanaim, we do say that the immersion at the appropriate fixed time is a mitzvah. V'hacha miflagei. If that's the case, then we have to suggest that their machloket is a different topic. Namely, Rabbi Meir Savar makshinan haza'ah l'tfila, that we make an association, right? We identify the sprinkling of the Kohanim as a parallel to Tefillah. The Rabbi Yossi Savar lo makshinan haza'ah l'tfila, but Rabbi Yossi holds that we do not make this association between sprinkling and immersion. The Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim, and as far as he goes, in other words, where does he stand on this topic? Imakish haza'al tefillah, if he does make the association between sprinkling and immersion, afilu kohen b'yom kippur nami, then likewise the Kohen Gadol on Yom HaKippur should also need it on a daily basis for each of the 7 days of his sequestering, and not just 2 days. Ilo makish haza'al tefillah, and if Rabbi Chanina Sgan Kohanim does not make the association between sprinkling and tefillah, afilu kohen hasoref et hapara nami lo, then even the kohen who is burning the para aduma, he should not need any sprinkling whatsoever. So the Gemara continues, La'olam lo makish. It would appear that Rabbi Chanina Sgan Kohanim does not make that association. The kohen hasoref et hapara ma'aleh ba'alma. And the fact that the kohen who is burning the para aduma, that he needs sprinkling each of the 7 days, as opposed to the kohen gadol for Yom Kippur that only needs it the 2 days, that the rabbis made at ma'aleh ba'alma. They made a higher criteria, okay? It would be the case. Kiman azla, okay? Ha detanu rabbanan. As says that which was taught by the rabbis, ein bein kohen hasoref et hapara, the kohen gadol b'yom hakippurim. There is no difference, it would appear, between the kohen who burns the para aduma and the kohen gadol on Yom Kippurim. Ella, rather, as we go to the next Amud Beis, right? Shezeh prishato lekedusha ve'achiv hakohanim nog'im bo. That one kohen, the one kohen gadol, simply his sequestering is for the purpose of sanctity, and his fellow kohanim can have contact with him. V'zeh prishato letahara, and the kohen who is burning the para aduma, his sequestering is for the purpose of purification. Ve'ein echav hakohanim nog'in bo, and his fellow Kohanim cannot have contact with him. Okay. Now, Kiman. So we ask the question, according to whom is this? O Rabbi Meir, O Rabbi Yossi. Is it Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Yossi? De'i Rabbi Chanina Baskan HaKohanim. Because if it were Rabbi Chanina, right, Skan HaKohanim, Ha Ikanami Ha. Okay, if that's the case, okay, there would be another point of difference, right? Namely, what would that other point of difference might be, right? Okay, that there would be a fact that one is sprinkled only 2 days and one is sprinkled 7 days. Now, Gemara picks up with a braita that challenges Matkifla Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. So Rabbi Yossi challenges Rabbi Chanina with the following: Bishlema Rishon Shema Shlishi. Okay, if we say, okay, that we sprinkle him on the first day, okay, of his sequestering, okay, it could be, right, that maybe he did have, let's say, some sort of contact with something that would render him tamei. After 3 days, okay, he had to wait, and then he can be sprinkled. So the first day of his sequestering might be the 3rd day of his, I'll call it, recovery from Tuma. Sheni, Shema Shlishi. Or if we sprinkle him on the 2nd day, maybe that's the 3rd day of his recovery. Shlishi, Shema Shlishi. Or maybe if we sprinkle him on the 3rd day of his sequestering, the Kohen that's burning the paraduma, okay, again, to get him tahor, maybe that's the 3rd day after his tumah. Or we might figure the following, okay? Chamishi, that if he's sprinkled on the 5th day, Shema Shvi'i, maybe that 5th day of his sequestering turns out to be the 7th day after he's reached a point where he can be purified. Okay. Shishi, Shema Shvi'i, or perhaps we sprinkle him on the 6th day of his sequestering, because that could be, again, the 7th day of his becoming clean. Shvi'i, Shema Shvi'i, or perhaps we sprinkle him on the 7th day of his sequestering, because that turns out to be the 7th day when he would become tahor. Right? Okay, everybody with me there, right? However, now he continues, Rabbi Yossi, Ela Ravi'i, but regarding so that covered the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th. 6 days out of the 7, when the Kohen who's burning the para aduma we might justify, let's say, his having been sprinkled. But what about the 4th day, right? Ela Ravi'i lamali haza'ah klal. On the 4th day, Rabbi Yossi would challenge, why would he need any kind of sprinkling whatsoever? So, what happens? Lo, b'shlishi iska l'sefuke. So Rabbi Chanina could answer no. Okay, regarding the 3rd day, okay, of his becoming clean, there could be a doubt. V'lo b'shvi'i ika l'sefuke. So Rabbi Yossi responds back and says, but what about maybe on the 7th day? There could be a doubt. Ula ta'amayich. And according to your line of thinking, he says, Haza'ah kol shiva mi ika. According to that basis, okay, why then would we say that he needs to have his sprinkling done each of the 7 days? Is it really necessary? V'hakaimala. And don't we hold, therefore, the haza'ah shvut? Not only that, says Rabbi Yossi, but the sprinkling is a rabbinic requirement. And there's no shvut in the precinct of the Beis HaMikdash. So why do we even require it whatsoever? Ve'ena dochet Shabbat. And certainly it doesn't, right, override Shabbos. Elamai itlach lamema. So therefore, what do you have to say? Right? Shiv'ah levar mi Shabbat. That he gets Kohen for burning the para aduma becomes sprinkled all the days except a Shabbat. Hachanami shiva levar mirevi'i. Here too, in our case, perhaps we have to say that that Kohen would be sprinkled 6 out of the 7 days for the sequestering to burn the para aduma, but not on the 4th day. Now, what happens? Amar Rava. Rava now tells us the following. Hilkach, Kohen Gadol, B'yom HaKippurim, Delo B'didin, Talia Milta Ela B'kavia Diyarcha, Talia Milta. Okay? You raise the question of Shvut, which is a rabbinic requirement. We can answer the following, says Rava, that in a sense, what is he telling us? Since this Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, okay, his sequestering and his sprinkling, okay, is something that we as the rabbis, I'm going to say, required it, okay, and it is not based, okay, it's based on our requirement and not necessarily based on it being fixed date regarding the month, okay, Talia Milta, okay, Betlata, Betishrei, Bai Lefushe, okay. So therefore we would say that this thing is such that on the, okay, whatever the 3rd of Tishrei falls, that's when we separate him, okay, right? Because he has to be sequestered 7 days, whatever the day the 3rd of Tishrei is, we remove him. B'chol emat, the mitrame tlata b'tishrei, okay, right? And what happens? Right? That's when the time would come to remove him on the 3rd of Tishrei, mefarshinan lei. That's when we would remove him, okay? Because it's not really dependent on us as it is dependent on the calendar, right? Ela b'kavia diyarcha talia milta, because it's the 10th of Tishrei is the Yom Kippur. So to satisfy the 7 days before, we have to remove him, sequester him on the 3rd. Aval kohen hasoref et hapara, but regarding the Kohen who's going to be burning the para aduma, the bedidan talia milta, okay, that is dependent on us, okay, on our setting that time, right? What happens there? Mefarshinan le b'revi'i b'Shabbat, that there we could sequester him on the 4th of the week, right? Ki hechi de nitrame revi'i shelo b'Shabbat. Okay, and that by doing so then, okay, and that this 4th day, right, would come out on Shabbat, Okay, and therefore, as a result, fourth day of the week, rather. So that fourth day comes out on Shabbat. Right? So that would exclude his having to be sprinkled that day. Okay, and that's how he gets around the idea that the 6 days the Kohen for the para gets sprinkled, and the fourth day, where he couldn't justify sprinkling, if that's Shabbat, he would not get sprinkled on that day. And that ends that particular piece of Gemara. Okay, so do we come to any kind of a conclusion? Okay, not really. Okay, we still see that there's an argument. Okay, just as we saw, there was an argument regarding the tzitz. Okay, so likewise, we see there's an argument here, okay, as to what is the status of the Kohen when he is to be sprinkled, okay, as part of his sequestering. Okay, now, having discussed that element, we saw that our Mishnah then said that the Kohen Gadol for Yom Kippur was to be removed to a specific chamber, right? And they called it Lishkat Parhadrin, okay? And we said that was the chamber of the administrators or the officials, okay? So the Gemara now is going to focus on that aspect. Tanya, we have a Braita, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, okay, that says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, V'ki lishkat parhadrin haita, was it really a chamber of the councilmen, of the authorities, okay, of the, right? V'halo lishkat balvatai haita, but wasn't it more a chamber of the council members, of the senators, okay, so to speak? Ela betchila hayu korino ta lishkat balvatai. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda is telling us, originally it was called the chamber of the councilmen, the senators, okay? Umitoch shenotnin alav mamon lekuhuna, and as a result of the fact, as we said, that over time, particularly in the Second Temple, okay, the position of Kohen Gadol was available for purchase, okay, and therefore the knowledge of the avoda by that individual was sometimes questionable, okay. Umachlifin ota kol shnei masar chodesh kipar hadrin, okay. Halalu shemachlifin otam kol shnei masar chodesh, okay, and that it used to be a situation where after a year, the same way the senators, the councilmen were removed and then new ones were voted. So likewise, we could say that perhaps after a year, likewise the Kohen Gadol was removed and therefore a new one purchased the position. Okay. Lefichach, therefore, says the Gemara, Hayu kor'inota lishkat parhadri.
Yeah, I'm here.
That's why they called it the chamber of officials. Okay. Okay. Now, the Gemara wants to now raise an interesting point. Okay. And it's citing another Gemara, a discussion on demai. Okay. Demai being, remember, doubtfully tithed produce. So the Gemara tells us, Tman hatam. It was taught there in regards to that topic. Hanach tumim.
Let's make it
Okay.
two.
Lo chayvu otan chachamim lahafrish ela trumat maaser v'chala. Okay? So, in regards to this situation, we're told as follows. It were these same counselors, authorities, that made the tax rules. Okay? And we're told here that in regards to the bakers, right, these authorities did not obligate them, the sages did not obligate them to separate, to tithe, okay, certain items, with the exception of Trumat Maaser and Chala. Those were required. Okay? Now, why was that the case? Bishlema Truma Gedola Lo. Okay? We can understand, says the Gemara, why they did not require them to take Truma Gedola. Remember, that's the first Truma that goes to Kohanim, because people generally, even Amei Haaretz, generally maintained that practice. They knew they had to give Truma Gedola, first Truma, to the Kohanim. Tanya, and we'll go over it a bit as follows, as taught, namely the following. Lafi sheshalach b'chol gvulei Yisrael v'ra'ah she'ein mafrishim. Okay, because these authorities sent out supervisors, let's say, okay, to all the areas, all throughout the land, right? And what did they see? Okay, shemafrishin, she'ein mafrishin ela truma gadola bilvad, that they saw that the people, for the most part, did separate truma gadola. Okay, so for that reason, the authorities, the sages, did not have to require that. Maaser rishon umaaser ani nami lo. Okay, and so therefore, right, also they did not require the bakers, okay, to do maaser rishon and maaser ani. Okay, maaser rishon, right? We said that was going to be the section, the amount that went after maaser, okay, right, after Truma Gedola, okay, maaser rishon being the portion that went to the Levim, and maaser ani, right, the portion that was taken in the third and sixth years of the cycle that went to the poor. Okay, right? Maaser rishon also they did not require. Why is that? Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, because we say here, okay, that the claimant can produce appropriate evidence, right? However, says the Gemara continuing, ela maaser sheni, but the second tithe, remember that was the one that they were supposed to take and then either bring the produce or exchange it into money and bring the money to Yerushalayim and then purchase food and eat it there. Nifreshu, okay, they made them separate, the bakers, vinasku, and they made it take it up, v'nichluhu b'Yerushalayim, and made it eat it there in Jerusalem. Right? Now, what happens? As follows. Amar Ula, says Ula, mitoch shepahadrin halalu choftin otam. That was, he says, Ula, that was because these authorities would beat, okay, whether that was physically or not physically, but let's say financially, the Otan, Kol Yud Bet Chodesh, In other words, they could charge a surtax, so to speak. Okay? Va'omrim lahen machro bezol, and they would always tell them during those times to sell cheap, right? Lo adran chunhu rabbanan. Okay, what the rabbi, these authorities then for did not put the burden on them, require them to take Maaser Sheni. Okay, and so here we're going to, finish with the phrase Mahi Parhadrin. What did we mean by Parhadrin? Okay, Porse. These were the, according to some managers, according to others, royal appointees. Okay, these were the tax collectors. And what they did, of course, was they would take a share of the taxes. And so they would raise the taxes so that they could keep their share and still pass on the required amount to the government. Right? And that's where we're going to stop today, okay, with this new material, because I wanted, since the Amud Beis, Tet Amud Beis is a pretty long chunk, all right? So we'll pick up there, okay, on Tet Amud Beis tomorrow. Tet Amud Aleph tomorrow, and it should give us enough time to deal with that longer piece on Tet Amud Beis, okay?
Thank you.
All right, everybody, take care.
Have a good day.
Well.
All the best.
Good day, everybody.
All right, okay.